see if there's anything that can be done to prevent this sort of thing, if not an individually isolated thing.
I guess it is too soon to tell. I think it was shocking for everybody to hear these allegations.
I think it goes back to the fictionalized version of forensics, where every forensic scientist is portrayed as being above average or ethical or never makes a mistake, or they're the ones finding the mistakes. And that's the view of the public. And in reality, like you said, everyone makes mistakes.
Right. As long as there's humans involved in the process, there's going to be errors. People who are not going to follow the rules, no matter what, it doesn't really matter what regulations you put down, right? I think we have to see how the investigation of these cases pans out, whether it warrants any additional sort of regulation.
What is the one thing that makes you cringe the most on TV or in books as far as crime scenes go?
Oh boy, just one thing?
Well, no, you can list as many as you like.
Well, I think you've touched on part of it already, in that the way forensic scientists are portrayed is that they're the ones that solve the case and have the answers, and cases always seem to work out one way or another. And sometimes in real life, they don't. They're certainly not solved in an hour. Sometimes they're never solved. Sometimes there isn't enough evidence. And that's troubling, of course, for everybody involved. I think the two words that make me the craziest are splatter, the word is batter, when they talk about casing left at a scene. They're cartridge cases, not casing. Casing is what you put sausage in.
Ah.
So the technical name is a cartridge case.
Hey, well, we'll have to listen and point that out. We're educated now.
But I totally agree about the batter. I've heard that before. And I've heard even in real courtrooms that be said.
Yeah. Anybody that's take a basic 40-hour bloodstain course would know or should know that the word is batter. So that would then lead me to look at that person's qualifications to be testifying about it.
Absolutely.
In fiction, we have a very well-known TV or movie. It was a series, right? Dexter.
Yeah.
Okay. How did Dexter not get caught?
Well, probably because it's TV. And to tell you the truth, I have not watched the series. My niece tried to get me to do it. I just couldn't make it through. I just couldn't do it. So I did a little research, and as I understand it, there were at least a few people who suspected or knew ended up dead themselves. So I think he didn't get caught pretty much just because it is TV. Going back to your last question, one other thing is that what we see on TV, on the television shows, and even news coverage as cases, we only get a very small portion of the evidence. And I realize that they have to do what makes entertaining TV, and they have a limited time in which to portray this information. There have been times where I've been in the courtroom and come back to my hotel room and had the news on in the background, when all of a sudden I'll hear a familiar name, not realize until that moment that they were reporting about the same case, because the way it was being reported, it made me wonder if they were in the same courtroom I was in. It's amazing how it can be portrayed and slanted one way or another. And I think it's important for folks to know that even with things like Dateline and 48 Hours, and I watch those all the time, that you're only really getting a very small, distilled down portion of the evidence. There may be additional information that would lead you to come to a different conclusion than what the show does, or you may come to the same conclusion. But I think it's important when people watch it, they understand that they're only seeing a very, very small portion of the available evidence.
Very true. I'm curious, did you watch the show Exhibit A on Netflix?
Yes, I did.
What did you think of that? Especially the one that had to do with the blood.
Yeah, I thought it was not too bad. Again, I think it could really go a lot deeper.
My husband and I watched it together, and when it was there, we were like, wait a minute, there seems like there should have been a lot more here.
Yeah, our discipline has, like I said, taken kind of a beating recently. The problem really is not with the discipline itself. The problem is with individual practitioners. I think people are not able to see that distinction. We're not unlike pathology in the sense that what we come up with is our opinion based on what we've examined, the same thing as it is for pathologists. To be a pathologist, you have the minimum qualification of being a pathologist. And that's not the case for bloodstain pattern analysts. There isn't a minimum qualification like that across the board that everybody has. Because of the way people are admitted as experts, the bar that is that anybody that has knowledge, training, education, or experience that's greater than that of the average person, that could be anybody that has had a basic 40-hour course and somebody that's got 50 years of experience and everything in between. So I think that kind of exposing or differentiating the discipline from individual practitioners is very important, because when a liquid is acted upon by a force, it's going to behave in a predictable manner, whether that liquid is blood or water or whatever. And that's what allows us to teach this discipline, is that it's repeatable because it follows the laws of physics.
One thing that they always show on these CSI and all these shows, and I was curious if this happens in real life. Do you guys use the red string?
Yeah, but it's not always red.
Oh, okay.
That actually is a technique called stringing that is used to find the area of origin of the bloodshed. But there are also now computer programs that you can input the stains and it can be done in the computer program.
So they were not making that stuff up.
Not everything.
Anita, we cannot thank you enough for being on the show. And do you have any upcoming events or books or anything you would like our listeners to know about?
No events that I can tell you about right now. I've written a couple of textbook chapters, crime scene investigation and bloodstain pattern analysis. There are a lot of good resources out there. One of my favorite tech in bloodstain is Principles of Bloodstain Pattern Analysis Theories and Practice by James Kish and Sutton. I really do like that book, and the photographs and figures that are in there I think is a really great resource.
Okay, well, we will update our show notes with that information if anybody would like to go check that out. We always like to have resources for our listeners.
And for any aspiring forensic scientists out there.
We're just the novice who's really interested, like myself. My husband worries about me a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'll bet. Well, I appreciate you ladies having me. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Anita. It's been wonderful having you.
And before we go, can you tell our listeners your website so if they would like to go check you out?
Sure, it's www.az as in zebra forensics forensics.com.
Wonderful. Thanks, Anita.
No problem. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
As part of this podcast, we try to find interesting people to interview that have to do with the industry as far as fiction versus nonfiction. And we thought that Anita would be a great fit. I hope you enjoyed hearing how sometimes fiction does not get it right.
Well, that's not a surprise, but that was a fascinating discussion about what it is like to work as a real-life crime solver.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that TV and books get wrong is they show these detectives working on a crime from soup to nuts when that is not the case. Everybody has a job to do. Another thing they get wrong is each person is working on 7, 8, who knows how many crimes at one time. They can't dedicate just to one crime. It's good to hear that there's people like Anita out there.
Anita has a firm that handles bloodstain evidence, and it's called AZ Forensic Associates LLC, and you can find information about that firm and about Anita online at bloodstainevidence.com.
Well, that brings us to the conclusion of our interviews.
So we have coming up Halloween.
Absolutely, getting closer and getting excited.
October 25th and 26th in historic Ellicott City, Maryland. And you can find information about that at HallowRead, HallowRead.com. And you can also get
a 15% discount if you use the code Dark and Stormy. And I definitely encourage you to go on their website and see the amazing list of authors that will be attending the event. I think there's something for everyone.
Well, this is mainly a spooky story event, as you would imagine, because it's so close to Halloween, and it's called Hallow Read. Several of these authors are also mystery authors, and coming up, we are going to have interviews with several of those.
Yes, so stay tuned for that. Also, check out our website, which is itwasadarkandstormybookclub.com. There you can listen to all of our episodes. You can check out our Patreon. One thing we definitely encourage you to do while you're there is to sign up for our newsletter. We are just getting better and better. And when I say that, Kathy's getting better and better at doing our newsletter.
Well, it's a lot of fun, especially when I get it right. I get so tickled when something comes out right. But this time, I'm going to add a new feature. In January, we are going to offer short stories. If you have a short story that you would like to have published in our newsletter, you can start submitting those now.
And anyone can submit a story, whether you're a published writer or a beginning writer, it doesn't really matter. And if you have a story that you've published before, I guarantee you, for most of our readers, it'll be new to them. So don't be discouraged from submitting those. We cannot wait to see what you come up with. We are waiting here patiently for these submissions to enter our inbox. And the email address to submit those are darkandstormybookclub@gmail.com.
I'm sure our email's going to be bombarded with those story submissions now.
Well, stay tuned next week for another riveting episode.
Yes, this was number 78. Can you believe it?
Yeah, it's crazy.
But hopefully we have gotten much better.
Yes, and we love doing this. Keep with us, and I think that you will be surprised at some of the things we come up with.
We are.
Or some of the things that fly out of our mouth. So, who knows?
See you next time. And remember,
life would be boring without a little mystery. Bye.